medieval historian here. Henry VIII is a legendary warrior king. He won many battles. He also fathered a few children. But what if I told you that his father, King Henry V, was even more badass? Seriously, this guy defeated an army twice the size of his own and captured a city that was thought to be invincible, all while being outnumbered, outgunned, and on the verge of starvation. Oh yeah, and he did it all while having a bum knee. Yeah, you heard me right. Henry V had a bum knee. It was so bad that sometimes he could only walk with the aid of a cane or a crutch. But when the time came to lead his men into battle, he shed his cane and led from the front, inspiring those around him to do great things. Before we get into the main event, let's quickly go over why Henry even decided to invade France in the first place. You see, at the time, England and France were still technically at war over the succession to the French throne. And while the fighting had died down since the Treaty of Troyes in 1360, the French weren't exactly letting the English kings walk all over them. In fact, after the death of Charles V in 1364, the French had rallied under the banner of Charles VI, who had the backing of both the people and the nobility. To make matters worse, many of the English nobles considered King Henry III's invasion of 1325, which resulted in the creation of the Treaty of Troyes and the recognition of King Edward III as the heir to the French throne, as a temporary measure, and refused to acknowledge it as permanent. They felt that Henry III had been pressured into signing the treaty, and therefore it was not binding on his successors. This argument would gain traction in the years leading up to Henry V's reign, and many would argue that Henry V had every right to invade France and claim the throne for himself. But it wasn't just about the French throne. England was going through some hard times internally. There was a lot of division between the English nobles and King Henry V himself. While Henry IV had managed to keep them in check, there was no guarantee that his son would be able to do the same. And to top it all off, England's economy was in the toilet. So Henry decided to invade France, hoping to bring in some much-needed revenue. In May of 1415, Henry V landed in Normandy with a mere 12,000 soldiers, far fewer than the 30,000 he had hoped for. On top of that, he had very little supplies, and food was already starting to run low by the time he reached the town of Agincourt on September 24, 1415. But despite these setbacks, Henry was determined to win a decisive victory that would finally end the 100 Years' War. The problem was, the French army was massive. It's estimated that Charles VI's army numbered around 25,000 men, more than double the size of the English force. On top of that, the French were well equipped, well trained, and confident in their ability to win the day. After all, they were fighting on their home turf and had the support of the locals behind them. The English, on the other hand, were exhausted, hungry, and outgunned. They were also surrounded by a thick forest on three sides, which made it difficult to maneuver their longbows, one of their most important weapons. But despite these disadvantages, Henry was not daunted. He had a plan, and he was confident that it would work. As the two armies faced off in the muddy fields of Agincourt, the English soldiers knew that they were in for a tough battle. But they were also excited. They had been training for this moment for years, and now it was finally here. As the battle began, the French charged forward, confident in their ability to crush the English. But then something unexpected happened. The English longbowmen unleashed a volley of arrows that decimated the French ranks. The French were taken by surprise, and their charge faltered. This was the first time that the longbow had been used on such a large scale, and it would have been a sight to behold. Arrows were flying everywhere, and the air was filled with the screams of men as they were struck down by the deadly projectiles. Meanwhile, King Henry V was leading the English cavalry personally. He was a skilled fighter, but he was also a brilliant tactician. He knew how to use his men and resources to their fullest potential, and he was not afraid to take risks. With the French army in disarray, Henry saw his opportunity and he took it. He led his cavalry in a daring charge that broke through the French lines and cut off their retreat. The battle was over in less than an hour, and the English had won a decisive victory. The French king and most of his nobles had fled the battlefield, leaving their soldiers to fend for themselves. As the dust settled and the English celebrated their victory, it became clear that they had just won one of the most surprising upsets in medieval warfare history. As the sun began its slow descent over the horizon, casting long shadows across the muddy battlefield, the English soldiers prepared themselves for the coming night. They had won the battle, but now they had to hold their ground against any possible French counterattack. With the day's fighting done, the men of Agincourt gathered in a solemn circle, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a dozen torches held aloft by the monks of St. Martin's Abbey. Around them lay the bodies of their comrades, slain in the heat of battle, and as they joined hands and bowed their heads, a hush fell over the weary warriors. Together, they prayed for the souls of their fallen brothers in arms, seeking solace and peace for their troubled spirits. Among them stood King Henry V, his armor now stained with the blood of battle. Despite the grime and exhaustion that coated his features, his eyes shone with an unwavering determination. As the last prayer faded into the twilight, the soldiers of Agincourt prepared for the long and lonely vigil that lay ahead. Each man knew that they were responsible not only for their own safety, but for the defense of their comrades and the honor of their king. And yet, as the night wore on and the whispers of the wind mingled with the cries of the wounded, a strange calm settled over the English camp. For in their midst stood a leader who had shown them the true meaning of courage and selflessness. When the time came for them to defend their king, he had vowed to stay by their side, even unto death. And that promise had given them strength in their darkest hour. So, as the men of Agincourt settled in for the night, they knew that they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. For they were not just soldiers, they were brothers in arms, bound together by a shared purpose and the memory of those who had fallen. They were the men of Henry V, and they would not fail their king. The next morning, the English were still able to put up a good fight, but they were eventually forced to retreat. However, in doing so, they inflicted heavy casualties on the French and managed to escape with their lives. As the survivors of Agincourt made their way back to England, they carried with them the stories of their comrades' bravery and sacrifice. For Henry V had kept his word and had fought alongside his men until the very end. Their deeds became a thing of legend, passed down through the ages in tales that celebrated their courage and determination. But perhaps the most important lesson from Agincourt was the power of unity and purpose. In the face of overwhelming odds, the English had been able to hold their ground and achieve a stunning victory. It was a testament to the strength that can be found in unity and the importance of having a clear and inspiring purpose. For King Henry V, the Battle of Agincourt was a moment of triumph and vindication. He had proven his critics wrong and established himself as a true warrior king. But it was also a costly victory, and he was left to mourn the loss of so many brave soldiers. In the aftermath of the battle, Henry V took steps to ensure that his soldiers were properly honored and their families cared for. He distributed alms to the poor and needy, built a hospital for the wounded, and held a grand feast in celebration of his victory. But no amount of feasting or charity could fully make up for the loss of so many lives. As the years passed and Henry V's legend grew, the memory of Agincourt faded from the minds of many. But for those who fought there, the scars of that day never truly healed. For they had seen the best and worst of humanity, the heights of courage and the depths of despair, all within the span of a few short hours. But perhaps that is why the Battle of Agincourt continues to fascinate us even today. It reminds us of the frailty of human life and the unpredictability of fate. It also shows us the incredible strength and resilience of the human spirit. If you want to know more about the greatest underdog victories in history, stay tuned because we've got plenty more where that came from. Check out our series on the most epic upsets in medieval history. Thanks for watching.